that. And we'll do the same thing on our Facebook page. So this is streaming on YouTube, on WMOM Facebook, on Hot Country Hits Facebook page, as well as on the radio, on your smart devices, and of course over our new app, West Michigan Radio. Amanda is in the studio with us this morning, and we appreciate her being here. Amanda from COVE. Amanda, thanks for stopping by this morning and being with us.
Yes. Good morning, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Over the last couple moments, I was talking about, and there's no easy way to frame sort of when somebody goes through a sexual assault. How to look at that anyway in a positive way. I mean, it's impossible to do that. Yeah. But we can learn from others' tragedies and heartbreak and that abuse that happens. And somehow we can help others. And that's where we can look at it in a positive way when somebody else can get out of a situation, can look at the red flags, can be able to say, I don't need to be in that position anymore because of what that person went through. Mm-hmm. Is that possible this day and age? I guess I'll ask the first question there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I think that, surviving a traumatic event, regardless of what kind it is, mm-hmm. There is healing after that. But it's really important to know your resources, know how to get support, know what each individual needs from that. I was just reading some studies a couple days ago, and the U.S. Department of Justice did a study of 1,000 sexual assault survivors, mm-hmm. and only 9% of those 1,000 were supported by a sexual assault agency.
Wow.
Yes.
9%.
9% out of 1,000 survivors. Yeah. So Sexual Assault Awareness Month for me really is just helping our communities understand that COVE is not only here for individuals in Mason, Lake and Oceana and Manistee County, but there are sexual assault agencies across Michigan and across the United States. Mm-hmm. And people should not be suffering in silence.
Can I ask, because obviously there's a lot of agencies out there. We talk with them regularly. Mm-hmm. Is it because people don't recognize them as an outlet? Is it because the agencies are not doing enough? Is it, where's that gap? 9% is such a low percentage. Yeah. And so I wonder where the breakdown happens in regards to that.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. Okay. I think that every agency operates differently. COVE really operates under some core values and philosophies that we believe is the most survivor-centered way to support our community members. But I also think it just comes with the lack of awareness of what we can actually do. Mm-hmm. As a survivor, it's nerve-wracking trying to reach out to tell your story and to say, yes, I need help, and this is what I need help with. And so I really want people to know what COVE does specifically, that, we talk a lot about we're here to emotionally support you, but there are some tangible things that we can do for people that does make the process after sexual assault a little easier.
And let's talk about that on the flip side of talking about the events in April, because I think there's still some curiosity. There's some, I don't know if confusion is the right word, but there's still that unknown of, what situation do you have to be in, or that you find yourself in, where COVE can step in and help you and get you through that. So I do want to dive into that a little bit today. Let's talk about the two events. There's one happening in Manistee and one in Ludington, at Vogue in Manistee, and then LACA in Ludington. So let's break it down for a moment. And before we talk about like the times and so on and so forth, why the event? And there's a special guest that's going to be there too, right?
Yeah, there is. We're really, really excited. We have Holly K. Dunn. She is flying in on the 18th. She's coming to talk about her personal experience. She is the author of Soul Survivor, and she is the only survivor of the railroad serial killer. Okay. So she has a inspiring story that we really are hoping that it opens people's eyes about the experience that people go through. Not only the experience, but what it really takes to truly heal from an experience. It's hard for us to be able to be out in our local community and talk about survivor stories because of our confidentiality laws. So this was a way for us to really get somebody's firsthand experience to open up, who's comfortable talking about her experience. And it was really kind of a literal open book as far as she wants people to understand.
Good point there. And you brought up multiple things. First of all, it is very difficult. This is somebody looking from the outside in, and tell me if I'm wrong on this. It's very difficult for somebody that has gone through sexual abuse to be able to get to the point of being able to share that with others.
Yes.
I would assume that and hopefully that's an assumption that many can make in regards to that. Is it because they are they're working on themselves first? Is that kind of that first phase of what happens during this?
Yeah, I would honestly even put it to they're still sort of in shock that this is their life and this is the reality of what they've experienced. I know personally, I've worked with family members, and that's kind of my why of being here. And I just remember sitting in a courthouse, and it was like they were speaking a whole different language. I mean, we didn't understand what was going on. And the only thing we could think of is, as soon as we walk out of this room, we're going to have to pass that person. And then we're going to have to go sit in the courts, and we're going to have to explain all the details. And so I think it's just that nervousness of like really opening and exposing yourself. And also just the fear of people not believing you, and believing every details, because sometimes your accounts of it doesn't make sense to other people because you yourself don't even know how this is really happening to you.
Do you mind diving a little bit more into that? I know when we've had you and others from COVE on the air before, that has come up where there is the concern, the issue of even family members not believing that victim, coworkers, friends, so on and so forth. Is that one of the biggest struggles that individual seems to, be fighting against when it comes to that? And how do you, from a COVE standpoint or even multiple agency standpoint, help them get through that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of like a 3-part thing, because you have your immediate support, your family, and for them, again, sometimes the shock of it, like there's no way this is happening to somebody in my family. And there has to be an explanation, or there has to be something other than what it actually is. You also have the ability where, you might know that person that they're accusing, and you're like, there is no way that person is capable of doing something. So there's those 2 factors to it. And as far as COVE, we have the unique ability. We don't have the tough job like law enforcement or prosecutors. We don't have to do the fact finding. We don't have to really get into the nitty gritty of like what actually happened. We can look at somebody and say, I believe you and I'm here for you.
That's powerful. Yep.
Yes. And that really does take off a load for people to say, okay, well, this is what my story is, and I can't find my voice, or I can't put the words to be able to go to law enforcement to clearly communicate where it makes sense, because sometimes it doesn't make sense.
Do you, let me be the devil's advocate for just a moment here. From and again, you have to, on the surface, believe somebody who walks through the door. We understand that.
Yep.
But there are the situations where there is the stories that don't add up, right? And from your standpoint, is there any sort of conversation or what happens when that happens?
Sure.
I'm curious about that, because we do see. And not often. There's more victims than there is, lies and everything else that piles up. But what do you do? Does that frustrate you when that happens?
Yeah, I think at some point when you're sitting down with someone and you're talking about their story and maybe things aren't adding up or you're very confused, I think that goes into some of that like intersectionality. People might be facing cognitive impairment. They may be using substance abuse. They may have other different disabilities that aren't allowing them to clearly communicate. So that's a piece of it too. Another is that sometimes that's actually people's reality.
Okay.
And we can't really pick apart that, because if that's their experience, then that's their experience. And again, the good part of all of this is for anyone who maybe that is their fear, they don't need to have that when coming forth to COVE, because that's not our job to make sure that this actually happened. And
You're there to support a victim that has walked through the door and make sure that they're helped. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We meet people where they are, and our services look like whatever a survivor wants it to look like.
Okay.
We can provide transportation. We do support groups. We have healing art classes. We can give people phones if law enforcement need to take it for evidence. So even if you're one of those people who, I don't want to sit and talk about my feelings or look at somebody in the face and tell them my whole life story, that's okay, because there are other ways that we can help you. Get you to court, help you understand some of the court process, just to make you comfortable enough to be able to report. Because again, there was a census done, and 63% of crimes of sexual conduct are not reported.
That's a huge percentage.
It's a big percentage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we're here to hopefully bridge that gap to say, like, we want people to be accountable for these crimes, and how can we support and help you and make you feel more comfortable to go to the police, to stand in court and do all the things that it really takes to go through that process.
And it sounds like we have a long road ahead of us if there's those kind of gaps out there still. That's why we want to, in segments like this. Oh, I'm sorry, Hudson's barking at a neighbor there. Then these particular segments with Sexual Assault Awareness Month, that's what we want to make sure we keep that conversation going. But as a community, how do we keep it going after this month and the next month and the next month?
Yeah, I really want to focus on our youth. I recently, for Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, I went to Manistee High School, Middle School, and I was so inspired by how insightful students are and how really ready they are to have some of these conversations.
Okay.
I taught consent. We talked about boundaries. We talked about red flags. And I really think that is where COVE would like to focus this next year, is just teaching our youth about some of these things, because we want them to be comfortable when they find themselves in situations where we can prevent some of this happening to them.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I have a curious question.
Yeah.
You talked about the next year and focusing on youth. Is there, when you are dealing with, and again, we don't want to cross any lines, but when you're dealing with the victims, when you're accepting them to come into COVE, is there a clear, at least in the Mason County area, and you serve even farther than that, but is there a certain age or demographic that we're seeing that the abuse is coming from more? Is it more adults? Is it older demographic? Is it rural? Is it city? Is there anything clearly showing that will help us understand? And again, it's everywhere that sexual assault happens. But is there any sort of, like, this is what we're dealing with locally here? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So last year, so we provide sexual assault nurse examinations. We have trained forensic nurses who collect evidence for age 12 and older within 120 hours after an assault.
Okay.
Last year, over half of our sexual assault exams were age 12 to 16.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
So we are seeing a lot of youth. We are also seeing, even if they're not coming in for an exam, we are seeing a high volume of youth utilizing our sexual assault services.
Okay.
And it really is a testament of the work of the school counselors referring and really getting them tied into services right away, rather than letting this go on throughout their youth and affecting them as an adult.
Okay. Because, some of us would think, okay, it's just adults and that happens. But having a reality check, obviously, is very helpful this morning.
Yeah.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with Amanda Nasor from COVE this morning. You have the two events. I'm going to go back to that for just a moment here. You have the two events, one in Manistee, one in Ludington. You want to invite people out. Is it, because we know that sexual assault is not just women that are affected by it.
Yeah.
Men can be sexually assaulted. So at this event, who do you want to see in the audience? What effect do you want to get from that, from those two?
I want everyone to come. I really want people to come who maybe right now, today, as they're listening, they're still like, I just don't know. Is this really happening in our community? Is this really a big problem? I want them to be able to come and listen to this story. I will also be providing some information at the event. There'll be some other partners for this event who sponsored it. So PFLAG will be there. The Manistee Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Response Team will be there providing information. And I want people who maybe they have a family member or a friend who sexual assault has affected them. I want them to come. Maybe they can get some insight on how to support their family or friend. I would love for people from the schools to come. That I really want us to be able to sit down with people and have a clear conversation of, if this is what your experience is, this is a place where you can go.
Very important. Because just like you threw out the statistics, the information there, those individuals that you just mentioned, those are going to be the branches that will be able to supply this information to those additional people and have that domino effect. Sorry, excuse me. Just getting
the
over
lingering cough.
It is. It's with me.
Yeah.
Sorry. Do you think that we, from a community standpoint, we lack, and fill in the blank? We had talked about the idea of not, not believing, that happened, that comes up. But is there something from a community standpoint that we can do better, that we are still lacking? Maybe to increase that percentage from 9% to 10 or 11%. What's the one thing that we keep forgetting about that we can talk about today?
Just that it is happening. And just because it maybe has not affected your family or friend circle yet, the reality is 1 in 3 women have been sexually assaulted. So you look around at work, you go to school, you go and just look around and think, there's 1 woman out of the 3 here that this has been affected. And just being able to say that, it is happening, and what am I personally going to do if somebody comes to me and says, hey, this is my experience, and how are you going to respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think on the flip side of that is for the victim, how do we, because again, outsider looking in, do we still see the victims hesitant to take that first step? Is that still happening out there? And what can we say to them this morning that will get them over that hurdle? Yeah,
we are still seeing it. I don't think it's at the fault of any one community. I think it is a personal experience and just a personal just worried about what this looks like if I do report it. So I think just from a standpoint of just believing people and just saying, I'm here from you. I might not know all the details. I don't need to know all the details. And really creating a support system where people just feel comfortable talking about it. It's such an uncomfortable conversation to have with people. It really opens people up to, disclosing things that we don't want other people to know about our personal lives. And so let's just make people comfortable and be uncomfortable if it means that we are supporting someone.
Yeah, good message there. Before we wrap up, and I know we've got the 2 events, so let's go over those dates again and times and locations for those that are listening and watching. Let's break that down.
So April 19th, we will be in Manistee from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Vogue Theatre. And then on Saturday, we will be at the Ludington Center for the Arts at noon to 2. So we've been really lucky to have a lot of sponsors for this event. Corewell Health of Ludington is sponsoring. We have, like I said, the Manistee Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Response Team, PFLAG, and the Manistee or the Mason County Community Foundation. So we got a lot of support from the community for these events. We're really excited. It's a free event. We do want people to register in advance just because we're limited for seating, but we want anyone who's available to come out.
All right. We'll put a link, I would assume, on the website for the website they can register there. So do that. beforehand. We're going to have you back on in the
Yes.
future with the actual author
Yep.
of this to talk more in depth on that. But before we wrap up today, I'd asked this question earlier on about services at COVE and just making sure that everybody understands what COVE is, what services are there, and how you can help them. So break that down for us if you don't mind.
Yeah, specifically for sexual assault, what I want people to know is about our sexual assault nurse examinations.
Okay.
It is imperative that if a person is sexually assaulted, there is a very small time frame in which evidence can be collected.
Okay.
What I want people to know who are listening right now is that you don't necessarily have to involve law enforcement to have an exam. So even if you are not ready, let a nurse preserve that evidence for you. We will hold your kit at COVE for as long as you are ready. And then when you reach the point where, maybe you've done some work, you've done some thinking about how you want to move forward, then we can get law enforcement involved.
Okay.
Our nurses are trained forensically to collect this evidence, and we have advocates who accompany those exams just to really support a person through that process. We do them right at our location at 906 East Ludington Avenue. It's a secured suite, and that's the message I really want people to know is about the sexual assault nurse examinations.
Absolutely. All right, good to know.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that up until today, so I'm glad you brought that up. If you want to learn more about not only the two events coming up, make sure you go to COVE, the website and the Facebook page, and it has information there. Website for everybody that's listening there, just so that they go there.
Yep, www.callcove.com.
Okay, all right. Make sure you go there.
Yes.
Find some more information. And then the next time we chat, we'll have the author. As
Holly
mentioned.
and I will be both together.
Yep. And we'll dive into her story and share that because, sometimes it's difficult, as you mentioned earlier, to hear those stories.
Yeah.
But it's important that we hear them, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the most inspiring way to get involved is by hearing someone's experience and looking at them and just seeing them as a person and not a statistic.
Absolutely. All right. Amanda, I appreciate you coming in
Yes,
today.
thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
For sure. 9:42 now on 102.7 Mom FM and Hot Country Hits.